When I was a young ragamuffin, can't remember exactly how old, but I was sitting in services at least 2 years ago, when the rabbi was giving their high holiday sermon, and they said something that I didn't quite understand. And before I even knew it, I said audibly, and much to the embarrassment of my grandmother, "What is it that you're thinking?" And in that honor, I wanted to start my sermon tonight saying, "What is it that you are thinking?" Now, this is a question that I, and I think many of us, have often asked our patriarch Abraham during the story we will read tomorrow, the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac, the story of Abraham almost sacrificing his son. How can he be so willing to try and sacrifice his son? Now, there's not much dialogue in the story, so we don't get Abraham's perspective. What we do know, though, is that Abraham argued just before this with God to preserve life in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, again, a few years ago in my first year of rabbinical school, all the new rabbinical students were going around and asking people about their connection to Judaism. Now, in this, I heard lots of wonderful answers. People discuss their favorite story or argument from our immense tradition, their favorite value and how they lived their lives, or even the relationships they created in Jewish institutions. There was one person, however, who said something I did not expect. They said, "Although I feel a connection to the divine, I don't really care for the tradition. I am spiritual, but not really religious." Now, this struck me as a little odd because they were studying, or at least at the time, to become a rabbi. However, since then, I've heard this same sentiment again and again. Religion, I think, in some ways has become a controversial word in the last generation. Now, in addition to noticing a significant lapse in religious congregational attendance, the Pew Research Center reported that there are over a quarter of the people in this country who feel that spirituality, but not necessarily connected to a religion. Now, there are some here who may feel that way today, and there are even times where I might feel that way, feeling a connection to the community of the divine, but just not really wanting to go to services. Now, however, when I really think about this, I believe it is because there is a misunderstanding of what it means to be religious. When I think of the past leaders of this country who made great change, for instance, Susan B. Anthony, Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., or even Cesar Chavez, all of them had a religious background. And it was those religious values which helped make change. So what is it about religion today which is taking us away from institutions? Is that bad? And how is it that we must keep Judaism vibrant in 5778? Recently, I was fortunate enough to attend the 1,000-minister march in Washington, D.C., which went from the Martin Luther King Memorial to the Justice Department. One of the main goals of this march was to take back religion for the public good, to help people see religion as an institution which supports and changes for the people. At this march, it was noted 54 years ago, almost every leader involved in the civil rights movement was a religious leader. And when we look at some of the major religions today, we often don't see a commitment to social change, but one to social norms. There are numerous examples of groups who hold on to fundamentals of religion, but in doing so, violate the value commandments of inclusion, compassion, and understanding. Now, it's not the first time in history, but there has been a movement in many religions which focus on those immovable bases upon which everything else is built. This, however, for me, is not religion. This is more closer to fundamentalism. Now, let us consider, if we will, the word religion. There are few understandings among scholars from where this word comes, but many scholars believe it to be coming from the Latin religere, or to bind. On first thought, this may seem like no difference, whether it's an immovable base or it's an immovable bond. However, looking at other words which share this root, we see the bond cannot function without movement. It's actually the lig part of religion which is the root, and that is found in the word ligament, the binds between our joints, which of course must be strong, but would not work if we could not move them. And it is also in the word ligature. If you have ever played the saxophone or the clarinet, this of course is the little metal piece which binds the reed to the instrument, strong in its bind, but But without enough flexibility to move, there would be no vibration and thus no sound. Religion, therefore, is not an immovable base, but one which is only strong enough to support, but flexible enough to move. For instance, a few weeks ago, the Nashville Statement was signed by 150 conservative Christian leaders to denounce same-sex relationships and transgender identities. Yes, there is a binding to the law, but no movement to broaden the tent, and in that way, less perspective, which leads to insular views and attempts to advance narrowly thought ethical ideals. And I've always thought that having groups with only one perspective promulgating ideals is very dangerous. Now, this group is not alone. This past year, we saw the Orthodox Rabbanut in Israel go back on a deal to provide a prayer space for women wanting to read Torah at the wall. The very Jewish value of occlusion, and of course the further understanding of Torah, was denied because of this narrow-mindedness, because of what I think is this misunderstanding of religion. Now, with this, in some ways, it's no wonder why people are leaving religious institutions. Our always moving understanding of the good is rising above our religious leaders and organizations. So, is it a bad thing? If religion is holding us back ethically, why would we want to bring it along? Now, although there are some setbacks, I believe that there is a lot that religion can be, when used properly, incredibly advantageous to reaching those higher ethical ideals, and would like to discuss three of those arguments today. The first being the first song of Fiddler on the Roof, of course, tradition. Building on what came before us is one of the best ways to ensure strong growth upward. Growth upward here being, I think, a society which has ethical goals and accomplishments. However, there is another benefit to tradition. We have answered, or at least discussed, many present-day issues over the last 2,500 years. For instance, there's a Jewish debate today about how our prayer services should be conducted. And this discussion includes two Hebrew words you may have heard, keva and kavanah. Keva meaning set or permanent, and kavanah meaning intention. Both have their pros. With keva, in a set service implies that we all know it, and anyone from any synagogue can go to any other and feel at home. However, that also means repetitive services. But on the other hand, this kavanah, or intentionality, or trying to move ourselves closer to the divine, as it says in Pirkei Avot, a chapter of the Mishnah that in English translates to the ethics of our ancestors, chapter 2, Mishnah 13, that one should never make their prayer fixed or set. It should never be keva. Prayer should be bringing in modern issues and spirit. However, Maimonides, a 12th century philosopher, argues that actually a fixed prayer is better for the community because it's better understood by all, no matter what their learning may be. Like many things in Judaism, this wasn't decided then, and it might not be decided now. But we do have an incredible resource in which to delve for information and perspective. Even though we don't have a firm answer to the question of how our services should be conducted, the fact that we have text that debates this, that seeks to understand why and how we pray, is an invaluable resource to us as modern Jews. The question that the ancient rabbis had so long ago are still prevalent today, and we can learn much from our tradition. Our second reason is the one which I think must be guarded the most carefully, because it is the one which, done inappropriately, could lead to those immovable values. This is the following of a set of laws which are designed to help both the individual and the community. In the Talmud, the great book of rabbinic law, in Baba Batra, there's a discussion of what to do with a beggar in the community. The rabbis discuss the issue, saying there needs to be institutions which break the bonds of poverty so this person doesn't need to remain the beggar. One rabbi says that this is great for the future, but it's also important that something is given now as well. And this becomes the halakha, the law, which helps create a cure for the ailment and a balm for the symptom. Now, this can be a set of laws which are used to help people in the community. However, they must always be examined with the perspective of everyone, and there must be a balance of enforcement. Because it is fine for me to bring my own humility to a situation, but I cannot impose that on you. I cannot give you humility. I can only humiliate you. Now, following a set of laws can create cohesiveness and equality in a community and set up a system where everyone is expected to contribute to a common good. Now, finally, the building and maintaining of relationships is so important when it comes to religion. Peter Beinart, a political commentator and columnist for The Atlantic, noticed something interesting with more Orthodox and evangelical denominations, which focus more on those fundamentals. Those who attended the institution regularly were far more open to others of different faiths, lifestyles, and ethnicities, while the ones who did not attend but still promulgated what they thought to be the message were far more xenophobic. That is, one of the goals of all our religions is the building of relationships with one another in all places of our community. I think it is a Jewish act to come here on Rosh Hashanah, but it is also a Jewish act to go to an interfaith event at a mosque or a church and build relationships. Using our religion as a guide to build thought-out, meaningful relationships is so important, whether you need a community to help you through grief or need to stand in solidarity with another group to show that most basic Jewish understanding that everyone is B'Tselem Elohim, created in the image of God. In all these reasons, I believe religion to be important, relevant, and needed in 2017 or 5778. What, though, do we need to make it this way? Well, of course, we must look to our tradition to find answers which have been asked for hundreds of years. This will help us gain insight of what to do, but of course also what not to do. We must take a set of actions which we would call law and place them upon ourselves to help both us and the community, but always be evaluating those with many understandings to make sure that they actually do help the community. We must push towards relationship building even in the most difficult times, not just with others from different religions or nationalities or lifestyles or ethnicities, but even those with different political understandings. It is only then we can help others understand our perspective. Without this, we too will become two different nations, and that unfortunately might lead to the other becoming subhuman, and I believe that is the start of all the atrocities which have ever happened in the world. Now, we are religious, and what that means is we stand when it is difficult to stand and give the community something on which to hold. But it also means we move. We consider the community often and see what we're doing which may be exclusive, and we move to meet everyone. Perhaps Abraham was thinking in the story of the binding of Isaac that he was too committed to the binding and not to the movement. I think he was actually being more religious in his argument with God over how many righteous people were needed to save Sodom. However, it was not until the bonds were loosened and Isaac could move did we get the reward for Abraham and all future generations. So I say, don't be ashamed to be religious, but know what that entails: a commitment to our tradition in deciding a more inclusive future. Therefore, I feel that I am spiritual and religious, spiritual in my understanding of connection, and religious in my commitment to social change. Shana Tova.